Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masechtas Beitzah daf Yud Zayin. We're going to begin on the very top of Yud Zayin of Aleph, second half from the top. Tanabanan. Yom Tov Shechol Yos b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, for example, Pesach, Sukkot, so we have a machlokas, how many brachos are said in the Shemona Esrei? Of course, normally we have 19. There's always 3, and then 3 in the beginning, 3 in the end. In the middle, we have 13. On Shabbos, we have 3 and 3. Those are always the same, as we said. 1 in the middle, so 7, just like Shabbos is 7. Yom Tov typically also has 7. But what happens when you have Shabbos and Yom Tov together? Actually, we have 8. The Omer shel Shabbos v'chniyatzmo shel Yom Tov v'chniyatzmo. You say one separate bracha for Shabbos and a totally separate bracha for Yom Tov, which of course is not what we're knowing. We continue to still only have 7. However, so we mentioned Shabbos, we have Yom Tov, and it's all together in that same paragraph. Rabbi Omer, we have to be sensitive to the language and the order of the bracha. Mekadesh Shabbos, that we sanctify the Shabbos. Who does? Yisrael, v'azmanim, as well as the Yom Tovim. So Tani Tanakh the Ravina Mekadesh Yisrael the Hashabbos v'hazmanim. So the question is, how do you put the word Shabbos? Do you put the word Shabbos that we're Mekadesh Yisrael? Are we Mekadesh the Shabbos, or are we only Mekadesh the Zmanim, the Yom Tovim? So Omer Ulei said, ought to what? Shabbos Yisrael Mekadesh Ulei. Vaha Shabbos Mekadesh V'Kaima. Shabbos is already Mekudesh. Even if Beis Din does nothing, doesn't make any difference. Shabbos is still coming every single week. So therefore, we can't say that Mekadesh Yisrael, that the Klal Yisrael is the one who's Mekadesh the Shabbos, where Mekadesh Zmanim, the Yom Tovim, but not Shabbos. El Ema Mekadesh HaShabbos Yisrael v'Hazmanim. We link Yisrael to the Zmanim. But when it comes to Shabbos, it's Mekadesh HaShabbos. So it's interesting. We normally on Shabbos say Mekadesh HaShabbat, Mekadesh HaShabbos. So we still say that, but here we add Yisrael v'Hazmanim, because the Yisrael is Mekadesh the Yom Tov. Rabbi Yosef Halacha Kerebi Ketaretz Ravina. Tanaban Shabbos Shechol Yos Rosh Chodesh O B'Chol Shemoed. Let's say you have Rosh Chodesh and it falls out on Shabbos, or Chol HaMoed Sukkot, Chol HaMoed Pesach falls out on Shabbos. So how does the davening go there? So Arvis v'Shachar Mincha. When it comes to our 3 davenings that we have all year round, Mispal Sheva, just like on any Shabbos, we do 7 paragraphs. In Avoda, as we know, in Ritzei, we say what's called the Me'en HaMoira, the reflections of the occasion, which is referring to Yal V'Yavo. V'im loy oimer, if we don't say Yal V'Yavo in the Amida, then Machzirin Oiso, you have to repeat the whole Shemona Esrei. Rabbi Lezer oimer b'Hodah, actually it should be in the paragraph of Hodah, just like we say Al Hanisim. Of course, we're not knowing that we say Yal V'Yavo by Ritzei, and Al Hanisim is in Hodah. Umusafin, how about Musaf? So Maschem b'Shel Shabbos M'Sayim b'Shel Shabbos V'Hem Kedusha Sayim B'Emsa. Similar to what we said before, when it comes to when Yom Tov falls down on Shabbos, so too we say a Kedush, we say a Musaf in which has the same 7 brachos, and we incorporate the day in that bracha. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Yishmael ben Osha, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Oimrim, Kol Makam Shehu Skok L'Sheva. Anytime that you say 7 brachos in the Shemona Esrei, Maskeh b'Shel Shabbos and Masayim Shel Shabbos, Yom Kedusha Yom Emsa. Again, we always begin and end mentioning Shabbos. In the middle, we incorporate the Kedusha Yom, whether it's Rosh Chodesh, whether it is Yom Tov. That's what we do. Amar Rav Huna ein halacha koisa zug. Halacha is not like that. Amar Rav Chiya Barashi, Amar Rav Maniach Adam Irubi Tchumim Miyom Tov L'Chavero Umasna. So a different din. When it comes to Irubi Tchumim, in which, as we established already yesterday, that when it comes to making a tchum, so these are the 2,000 amos that a person is able to travel. So that is something which applies on Yom Tov as well as on Shabbos. So let's say a person wants to make an Erev Tchumim from one Yom Tov to the next. So one is allowed to do that umasna and make the condition as is discussed in Rashi. Basically, you say as follows: it's a 2-day Yom Tov in Golus in the United States. So one day is Kodesh and one's really Chol. So you make the following stipulation: if today is Kodesh and tomorrow is not, so then what I'm doing is nothing. Tomorrow I'll stay the other way around. If yesterday was Chol, then the Erev Tchumim that I made yesterday should be Chal, and therefore I'm able to go beyond the Tchum tomorrow. So that's what a person is able to do. Not that a person can just make this condition and then that's it, but at least for the second day. Let's see, Rashi. Miyom Tov l'chavero. Rashi says, Im niskar b'Yom Tov rishon. You remembered on Yom Tov, v'chol shnei yomim tovim chamish v'erev Shabbos. Let's say Yom Tov is a Thursday and a Friday, and then also have a Shabbos. Umasna im hayom chol, etc. So then you could do this. Mamanav shach havi erev. It works for the second day. But Rashi also says, b'shel tavshilin in tzarich l'shanos l'hachzer as tainu l'machar. You don't have to do this when it comes to Ruvi Tavshilin to make this condition on both sides. Okay. Amurava. Maniach Adam Ruvi Tavshilin miyoim tov l'chaveroi. A person can also make an Eruv Tavshilin from one Yom Tov to the next. Umasna, and over according to this opinion, he says you do have to make this condition. So Mandyom Ruvi Tchumim Kol Sheken Ruvi Tavshilin. Mandyom Ruvi Tavshilin Al Ruvi Tchumim Lo. You wouldn't be able to do this by Ruvi Tchumim. My taima to makni shvisa b'Shabbat lo. In order to be makni, a place of residence on Shabbat, that doesn't mean on Shabbos. Rashi says it's allowed dafka Shabbos because Yom Tov is also called Shabbos. But the idea is that on Yom Tov is a time in which you're not allowed to be makna shvisa. You have to do it from before. It's a suffix sveka diyoima. So Rashi says that lo hatir l'kanei shvisa b'Yom Tov b'afil masafik. Even according to this opinion, you can only do it when it comes to Eruvi Tavshilin. However, not when it comes to Eruvi Tchumim. Tanobah. Ein oifen miyom tov l'chavero. A person is not allowed to bake for one day of Yom Tov bread, for example, for the next day of Yom Tov. The emesomer, the truth is, mole isha kol kader basar. She can fill up her whole pot with meat. Even though she really only needs one piece, because it's the same level of tircha. You're cooking anyway, so you're cooking a pot of soup. What's the difference if it's a third full or full? It's completely full. For that matter, a baker can fill up a container of water. Only needs a small amount. He says additional bread he shouldn't bake. Only what's needed. However, Rav Shimon ben Elazar Omer no isha kol tanur pas. You can fill up your whole oven with bread. When the oven is full, then it cooks all the other bread better. So even though you may only need one bread, you can fill it up with, say, 20 breads, because all those other breads are going to just make that first bread taste better. So therefore, it enhances its quality. So therefore, it's really for the sake of that day as well. In fact, the halacha is like this leniency. Let's say a person did not make an Eruv Tavshilin. So who necessarily, we know that he himself cannot cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. The question is, what's the deal with the person's possessions? It's kemach. Is it a kemach neser? Do we say that his flour is also aser? Odilma hu neser in kemach neser. Maybe we should say that, okay, he's problematic, but not his objects, not his kemach. So my nafkamina, what's the difference? He can't do it anyway. Whether or not it's necessary for him to say, I want you to acquire my kemach, and then you bake the bread for me, you bake it, then give it back to me as a matana. Then that's what you have to do. there's nothing wrong with the kemach. In that case, it's not necessary for you to do this because they could just bake it right away. And this is question number 7. We'll see what the din is. Okay, so that's the question. So that's the question. So Tashma, someone who did not make an eruvi tavshilin, what's the din? Harihu lo yafe lo yavashel lo yatmin. He's not allowed to bake, cook, or wrap it up. Hatmana. Others can't do it either. Others can't do it for him. Ketzad hu oisis. What should you do? So makne kemchai. So beferish, he should be makne his kemach. They'll bake for him. They'll cook for him. Shmamina hu neser kemcha neser shmamina. So therefore, we see in fact that kemach is aser. Iboilhu over ofa mai. What's the din? This is the second question, number 7. If a person was over ubishal, if a person ended up cooking even though they were not supposed to, or baking in this case. So what should he do? It says that you actually have to give your kemach to someone else. That is apparently the only option. So the Gemara says, Vim Isa. Vim Isa. 1 second. If it's true that a person who violates and bakes, he's allowed Vimisa listening over Alpha Mutter. It should say that he's allowed to do it. Why do we come up with this reason? He has to give the bread to the kemach to someone else. Much better just be over v'afa, and that's it. Our answer is that's not a raya. Omer Rav Ada bar Masna, Tana tekanta de hetera katani, Tana tekanta de surah katani. He's only going to mention things that are allowed. You're not supposed to be not make an erev tavshilin. You're supposed to make an erev tavshilin. So let's say you didn't, and maybe you're over v'afa. Okay, fine. Maybe it's allowed, but the reality is that's not what you're supposed to do. Tashma, Misha haniach eruvi tavshilin. Didn't make an erev tavshilin. You could bake umavashal umatmin. You could do all these things. The imratzel achol as eruve harishos biyadai. If a person wants, that's when you did make an erev tavshilin. Obviously, if a person wants to eat his erev tavshilin harishos biyado, you're allowed to. But achlo, it depends when you ate it. If you ate it adshul afa, adshul hitmin, let's say before you baked or did anything, then harizelu ya'afilu yavashlu yatzman lo blacherem. It's too late. You can't do anything anymore because your erev tavshilin has to be around at the time when you do the cooking. Others can't do it for you either. You're of course still allowed to cook for Yom Tov. Today's Yom Tov, tomorrow Shabbos. You can't cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. The heter is v'im hoiser. If there's leftover, there's leftover. You can leave it over l'Shabbos. You can't do this trick. V'im harim aser. If let's say you say, oh yeah, I'm just going to eat this erev tavshilin because it looks so good on Yom Tov, and then you bake on Yom Tov, and you say, oh, but I'm going to, I'll have some leftovers. That's a trickery. We don't allow that. So l'chayra, we see beferish that if you're over, if you violated, when it comes to eruv tavshilin, it's aser. Right? It says that's not a proof. Ravashi harama ka'amrit shani harama dachmir b'rabbanan tfeim amazed. When a person does trickery, that's even worse than doing something on purpose. Trying to cheat the system. That certainly is aser. But again, we're still not sure when it comes to avar b'mazed what the din is. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Heimer Hamani Chananyahi ve'aliba debeis Shama desanya Chanani Omer Beis Shammai Omrim in Oifen El Imkein Erev Bapas. The Ein Mavash you have to use bread, which again is interesting because we said before you're not supposed to use bread, but for baking you can use bread. Vein Mavashlin El Imkein Erev Batavshil. You cannot use any cooking unless you use a tafshil. Again, it's interesting. The language is eruvi tafshilin. The language itself tells you it's supposed to be a tafshil, not pas. But again, according to Beis Shammai, he's very strict, and he requires that if you want to cook, you have to have an eruv which has cooking, so that you start cooking. If you want to bake, you have to have an eruv which has baking connected to it. There's something baking that you started with. And for that matter, the intainen el imkein hoyu chamin temunim erev yom tov. So too when it comes to something insulated, you have to have insulated something before. Beis Hillel amrim arav betavshil echad. All you do is make one erev with any tavshil. The oisabo called sarklin. You can do anything. You can do atamana. You can bake. And furthermore, tanan, or it says over here tashma. Hamaisa peroisa b'Shabbos. A person who has takes off meiser on Shabbos, which you're not supposed to do, b'shogeg on shogeg because like you're fixing it. Yoichel. Since it was only b'shogeg, you can eat it. B'mezel yoichel. However, if you did it on purpose, your avar, and you took it off on Yom Tov, so we see that we're strict. Even when it comes to things such as this. The reason why we say you can't eat this is because he has other fruits, and since he has other options to eat on Shabbos, so we're going to say, you know what, you can't eat this. However, the question, this kind of solidifies the question a little bit more, quantifies the question. It's referring to a situation where you have no other food. So the question is, does it work? So it's Shema. Hamat bil kale b'Shabbos. Again, you're not supposed to, as we'll see why on tomorrow's daf, 4 reasons why you're not allowed to immerse kalim on Shabbos. B'shoigeg, you do it b'shoigeg shtavshin, you can use them. But mezel yishtavshin, if you did it on purpose, you can't. So again, we see we're strict when it comes to mezel. L'tzricha the isbei mani achrini. Again, you have other garments. Yinami efshe b'sheila. Another answer is, even if you don't have any other garments or kalim, you can always borrow. However, when it comes to food, you may not be able to borrow. Tashma. Hamavasha b'Shabbos b'shoigeg. When it comes to cooking, yoichel b'mezel yoichel. So we see clearly when it comes to cooking on Shabbos, if you cooked on purpose, you can't eat it. When it comes to Shabbos, we're going to be more strict. And because of that, we again end off with in the boy the lifshita. We don't know what the answer is when it comes to the area of tashilin. Says Rashi, when it comes to Shabbos, we're strict. Bishul Shabbos me'avos malachosu. That's one of the avos malachos. B'isur skilahu. Hilchach kansur rabban lemezid. That's why they're going to be strict when it comes to someone who violates b'mezid. However, says Rashi, Avar ba'afa b'yamtiv was Shabbos isur de rabbanan hu de'avad. Okay. So we don't really have an answer to that question. Weiter. Beis Shammai omrim shnei tavshilin. So we have the machlokas in our Mishnah. Does the erev tavshilin constitute of 1 or 2 dishes? So masnisin lo ki'aytan. The Sanya, Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Moedim Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, they all agree al shnei tavshilin shesarech. Everyone says you actually need 2 dishes, not what our Mishnah says. So what's the machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? Al ma nechlu al dag u Beitzah she'olah. If you have a fish and you have an egg on top of it. Beis Shammai omrim shnei tavshilin, Beis Hillel omrim tavshil echad. The question is that considered like 2 dishes or 1? So it's interesting. It seems like in this case now Beis Hillel is actually going strict. Okay. B'shabin she'im pir Beitzah v'nasin lo toich dag. And let's say a person mashed an egg and put it into a fish. O sherasak kafloitois. And let's say a person again smashed up these leeks v'nasin lo toich dag, put it into a fish. Shehin shnei tavshilin, that's 2 dishes. Amarava hilchos katana didan believe the Beis Hillel. And the halach is like our town of our Mishnah, like Beis Hillel, they only need 1 tashel. Even though again it's just we're naig, we take a matzah and we take like an egg. So the idea behind this is it's similar to like Beis Shammai a little bit. First of all, it's 2 tafshilin, and the matzah is for baking, and the egg is like cooking. Okay. Achlu osh avad harizel yavashu ola. Rabbi Naktinan hiskil bisasai. If a person began making dough, the nechlai ruvo goimer. Even though you didn't actually complete the baking process, all you do is have a dough. But since you started the process, even though the Arab is not here anymore, you can complete it. Okay, we're going to stop here. TA 22. Mishalo hiniach eruvi tavshilin. Someone who did not make an eruvi tavshilin. Heim acherem yichon l'afais mekamchoi avuroi. Can someone make it for you? And the answer, as we said, which is similar to question 7, is yeah, you certainly could. I'm going to make this similar to question 7, TA 22. But what you have to do is you have to be makna to him. You have to actually give up the rights of this dough. Let's see how he writes. Im makna lahem mutter v'im lab aser. Okay. TB 25. Mishal nerech eruvi tavshilin. We didn't make an eruv tavshilin. Mahu vashel acherem b'shalhem. So this kind of like encompasses a lot. So let's say, can someone cook for you? And the answer is no. That's aser. What if they lacherem b'shalhem or mahu shibishu acherem shaloi b'shaloi? Can they cook your own stuff? The answer is no, and because you gave it to him. Over ba'afam mahu le'achayil. So that was, we said, was the boy l'ishata, and herem b'hoisif al b'shuloi. If, let's say, a person does this trickery and adds on to it, so on that we're going to be even more strict, even more than Mezid. Adkan.